There, VT English for students. This week we're going to be focusing on how to read and answer questions about graphs and charts, data information, that type of thing. I know that Mr. Roberts is going to be teaching you how to make those on Google Sheets, but this week in English you're going to be focusing on how to read them, answer questions about them, but also create your own. Yours will be about something you're studying in either history or science, maybe even AQR, Mr. Roberts class. Whichever one you choose, I want you to make one for that. But that is something we'll discuss later. So let's start with this PowerPoint, which will also be on the Google Classroom. All right, so graphs and charts. The first step in learning how to read a graph is to actually look at the graph very carefully. Look at the title, look at the labels, looking at each part and figure out what it's trying to tell you. And if there's a question, then you need to figure out, well, what is it actually asking you? Because it's not always super clear unless you look at it closely. And then finally, you need to refer back to the graph and locate the answer. The information is going to be directly in the graph. Okay, so refer back. So the first type is data questions. So this first one, like I said before, you need to look at the topic, which is the title. Regular coffee profits compared to fair trade coffee profits in Tanzania. So if you look at the top there, the bubbles are fair trade coffee, and they're pretty consistent, about 130, close to 140. That's $1.30, $1.40. Because if you look on the side there, it says amount in US cents per pound. And then the bottom is the year, so it goes 2000, 2002, 2004, 6, 8. And then the bottom line there is the regular coffee. Okay. So the question is, the data in the graph indicates that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade coffee and those from regular coffee occurred during which period? Well, we're looking at the greatest difference. So where is it the most different? Well, if you look at between 2002 and 2004, those are the lowest on the dotted line there, so that's going to be the biggest difference or the greatest difference. So the answer is B. Now this one is changes in depth of isotherms in an internal wave over a 24-hour period. Well, this one's going to be a little different because the top is where it starts instead of the bottom. So at the top it has the hours, 0 hour to 24 hours, and then it has the depth below the surface of the water. So instead of going from the bottom up, it's going from the top down, showing the depth. So it goes 40 meters down, 80 meters down, 120 meters down, and at the very bottom 160 meters down. And if you look at the legend at the bottom, the dotted line is 13 degrees Celsius. That's the closest to the surface. That's about 20 meters below the surface. And then 11 degrees Celsius is the solid line, solid gray line, and that's about maybe 55 or so meters below the surface. 10 degrees Celsius is the dots, and that's going to be maybe 70, 65, 70 meters below the surface. And then the very lowest is going to be the 9 degrees Celsius. So the question is, in the graph, which isotherm displays an increase in depth below the surface during the period 1912 to 2024? So you look across the top and you look and say, okay, there's 1912 and 1920. And you look at the different depths. the top one, the dotted line, the 13 degrees Celsius, that goes down, deeper, but the 11, the 10, and the 9, they all go up during that time. So that's important to think about. So that's going to be the difference. The 13 goes deeper at that time, but the rest of the layers go up. Interesting. But the answer is going to be 13 degrees Celsius. All the others go up during that time. The next type is interpreting data. So you're going to have data and you're going to have the graph. So you have to make sure they are talking about the same thing. You have to draw conclusions and you have support based on their data. Alright, so this is two pie graphs. Right? The first one, figure 1, is primary occupation of public transportation passengers in U.S. cities. So that's going to be who rides it. Okay, so the majority of it is employed people outside the home, 72%. And then figure 2 is the purpose of them riding on the trips. All right, that's the why they ride on it. Okay, it's important to know what the purpose of the bar graph, what's it really wanting to show. All right? So the question is, which choice is supported by the data in the first figure? So you're not even going to look at the second figure. All right. So then you look at all the questions. The number of students using public transportation is greater than the number of retirees using the public transportation. All right, well, let's look at that. Students are 10.7% and retirees are 6.7%. All right, let's look at B. The number of employed people using public transportation and the number of unemployed people using public transportation is roughly the same. Well, employed people are 72% and unemployed is 6.4%, so that's not right at all. People employed outside the home are less likely to use public transportation than our homemakers. How do we know that? We know that employed people are using the train 72% of the time. I mean, or who use the transportation, but we don't know how likely they are. And then D, unemployed people use public transportation less often than do people employed outside the home. Well, at first that looks right, because unemployed people use it 6.4% and employed people use it 72%. But we don't know from this how often they use it. We just know the why, right? So A is the right answer. Frequency is not mentioned. All right, this one is going to be a little bit more complicated. You have to interpret, right? So the passage there, it says 32. If Empire apples are treated with 1 MCP, their flesh turns brown when the apples are first stored in the open air, though not under other conditions. All right, so if you look at the chart, it says the results of treatment to control browning of Empire apples. So Empire apples are a name brand of apples, right? And the light gray is untreated, and the dark gray is treated with the chemical. All right, and then the ones on the left are the apples placed immediately in controlled atmosphere, so refrigeration. And the apples on the left side, or the right side, apples placed in controlled atmosphere after 3 weeks in open air. All right, so if you look at the graph, if they're treated or they're untreated and put in the refrigerator, there's not much difference. But if the apple is not treated and just left out, it's a lot less brown than if you treat it with this 1 MCP. All right, so here's the question. Which choice offers an accurate interpretation of the data in the graph? no change. Well, we can read that in a minute. So let's look at A. A is wrong because the graph shows that Empire apples experience almost 50% browning after being treated with 1 MCP and placed immediately in controlled atmosphere. No changes in A. Correct. Let's look at C. C is incorrect because both dark bars show that there is browning. So C is not correct. D is wrong because there's more browning with 1 MCP apples that are stored in open air than there is with apples that aren't treated with MCP and stored in the open air. So D is not correct. B is true. The data indicate that roughly 50% of the apple flesh browned with 1 MCP treated apples placed in the open air and those immediately placed in a controlled atmosphere. The dark bar on the right is a little more than 50%, and the dark bar on the left is a little less than 50%. So B is correct. Roughly half of their flesh turns brown. Alright, so now you combine the data, the passage, and the graph. Alright. So as the map shows, soda is commonly heard in the middle and western portions of the United States. Pop is frequently used in many southern states, and Coke is predominant in the northeastern and southwest regions, but used elsewhere as well. Alright, now we're going to be looking at this text, but we're also going to be looking at the map. So the writer wants the information in the passage to correspond as closely as possible with the information in the map. Given that goal, and assuming that the rest of the previous sentence would remain unchanged, in which sequence should the 3 terms for soft drinks be discussed? Alright, so let's look. So if you look at the passage, what's the first region that's mentioned? The middle and western first. Second, southern, and then third is northeast and southwest. So then we need to put those, have to look at the map and see where those are mentioned. Okay, so the middle and western people say what? Pop. Southern people say Coke. Northeast and southwest people say soda. So the correct answer is Pop, Coke, and soda. Alright, so there is a very helpful YouTube video that I'd like you to watch. You can get there from the PowerPoint that I just showed you. It will go through how to read different types of charts and graphs, how to answer questions, analyze them. So I'd like you to watch that. It will be very helpful to you. Alright, so we'll look at this one, graphs and charts. These are some examples. So this one is, I got it from the history. So US dollar purchasing power is measured by gold. Okay, so we're looking at purchasing power, and we're looking at measured by gold. If you look at the top, it's from 2019, July. And the legend up at the top, it says $1,000 equals 0.71 ounces. And if you look at the bottom, it has the years from 1720 to 2010, looks like. And then on the right side, it's the amount of ounces of gold. All right, so if you look at the top left, when the country, well, it wasn't even a country then, when they first started tracking this, you could buy a lot of gold for $1,000, right? You could buy about over 50 ounces. And then as you can tell through the years, it's dipped down during different times. if you look around between 1800 and 1820, which is the Spanish-American War, that dipped down a little bit. And then we had the American Civil War right in the middle there. It dipped down a great deal. And then if you look at 1930, it dipped down like 41%. And then it dipped down again, probably during the Korean War. And then, as you can tell, around the 1980, where there was the crash, it really dipped down very hard. And so you really can't buy much gold at all for $1,000. All right. So there's another history one. If you look at the top, it says U.S. inflation rate by year. If you look on the left there, it has inflation rate percentage. So those numbers are the percent, either of inflation or recession. Right? So you can also look at the different years and see what's going on in history and see how it was affected by what was going on. This one is called the mean center of population for the United States between 1790 and 2010. And it has a legend there. The red triangles are the mean center of population. The purple ones, the mean center of population, well, it just has it's showing how it's gone from the East Coast to the West. And this one is something I think you'll be learning about in chemistry, the moles and the atoms. Periodic table. This is also chemistry, where you have chemical reactions. So there's things that you can get from this chart that you can use to answer questions. There's another one where it talks about the different types of bonds. I know he talked about that earlier in the year. And then there's a type of line chart that shows various variables here. So the first one is labor force participation rate for men ages 25 to 54 by educational attainment. So basically it's saying, well, on the left side there, it's the percent of annual average, and the bottom is showing the years. And so the black dots are showing the average labor force, so who's working, right? Now it looks like it's gone down from 1948 to 2018. All right, so who is getting below that average? The high school educated people, like they'll have a diploma or not. And who's above that average line? You'll have in red some college or associate degree, and then the green are people who actually have their BA or higher degree. So if you look at that, they're working in the workforce that much higher than the average there. All right, I think this is the last example, and this one is what schools can and should be providing in American. Okay, and if you look at the left side there, it's percentages, like who should be in Algebra 1, how many people should be in Algebra 1? Well, it looks like 90%. Who should take biology? Okay, 89. Who should take biology? 87%. All the way on down to calculus. So they believe that 50% of the students ought to take calculus. Okay, so there's lots of information that you can get from these graphs. All right, so I told you that you're going to be making your own. And so on Google Sheets, I'd like you to make a table. Make sure it's labeled. And described. This is the results of an imaginary soft drink preference survey by gender. So you have soft drink preferences: Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, or root beer, and the number of boys who like each and the number of girls who like each. All right, you could make your table however you want it, and you can have it on different topics, something you're learning in history, uh, chemistry, AQR, STEM. And then once you get your table made, then you can go to the top, insert, and go down to chart, and you can pick different types of charts, and you can customize it and label it and make it look like this, or you can make a line, or you can make pie graphs, or all kinds of graphs. All right, so then you would save it and turn it into me. Let me know if you have any questions. Have fun with it.